All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are live. Hey, this is a session I just wanted to hold in advance of a cover reveal. So I'm beaming this out live across a number of different platforms. It's going across Facebook, LinkedIn, it's on YouTube, it's on a whole different bunch of channels at the moment. So this is actually all part of a rehearsal because this exact same time next week, we're going to run a live cover reveal where you'll see the first really real exposure of the cover. There's been some images of it in the newspapers, but this will be a real cover reveal. You'll be able to see the whole thing. I'll be able to talk about it finally, and pre-orders will open as well, which is great. There's already been quite a bit of publicity around this book, so I'm excited to get to it and show you guys some more. But look, today I wanted to chat to you about, I guess, strategy for successful book launches. A lot of people ask me about this. This is the second time I've been through it. I've done it once with a nonfiction book about 2.5 years ago. It's called Survive Life in the SAS. We did a really solid launch. We had a pre-launch window. We pushed really hard on that, trying to get those sales running in that first week, because in a traditionally published format, you want to see as many people as possible buying that book in the first week. That's a signal to all the buyers out there that are in the major distribution channels. This is a book you need to get onto, and then you can get that flywheel effect, because a lot of your sales will happen in that early period. What I'll do today is we'll just go a bit behind the scenes, and we'll talk about the development of a traditionally published book, whether it's nonfiction or fiction. In this case, we'll talk about a fiction one. The experience was totally different to a nonfiction one. It was way harder, just an FYI, but I'm really proud we went through the process. I was with Pan Macmillan the whole time. I had a really great editor, Alex Lloyd, who was on my first book as well. And he's also an editor for some of the top action authors around. So he had a really good eye for, I guess, storytelling and building something to a great version. Took us about 18 months worth of work. I think we did 7 edits total. Each edit took quite a bit of time. But what I'll do is I'll bring in Candice Wyman, who's public relations or senior PR manager basically at Pan Macmillan, and she's helping run public relations for this book. And she'll be able to give, I guess, the publicist perspective and the publisher perspective on how these novels unfold and what they look like. So I'm just going to bring Candice in now. How you going, Candice?
Hi, Mark. How are you?
You got me?
Yep. Good to
there you
see
are.
you. You can
good,
see
thanks.
me.
How are you?
Good.
You're coming out live from the office in Pan Mac there.
That's right. Here I am in our Sydney office.
I was just saying, yeah, it's good. I've been up there a few times. So I was just telling everyone, we've done this once before with a nonfiction book, Survive Life in the SAS. That was nonfiction narrative and military biography, really, which is a much narrower kind of audience field. This is fiction. It's much bigger. It's totally different development process as well. And I think the process for launching is going to be a little bit different because the audience base, again, is different. So
yeah,
we've approached this totally differently, and then incidentally gotten a little bit of public relations early, which probably weren't expecting, but that's not a bad thing. Yeah, so I thought I'd open it up to you and just get your perspective on fiction novels, especially this one, and how it's unfolded so far.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Mark, as I don't know if everyone knows, but we also worked together for your memoir in 2021. So Survivor Life in the SAS. And as you've already said, even from a publicity perspective, promotion, like these books are very different. Obviously, the same author is the thing that ties them together. But a nonfiction, especially in a memoir space, it can often be easier to pitch from a publicity perspective as well, because you have different angles, like your book was so great as a memoir because it spoke about all these amazing things. Well, not amazing, but they're things that us regular Joes would never have experienced. So when it came to getting media coverage, that interest was there from journalists as well. But we're here today to talk about fiction, and that is a very different kettle of fish indeed. And the reason it's different is because any consumer, not someone like us who's in the industry, any consumer would know that how many books would get published every week in Australia? Dozens, probably dozens across all the publishers. There's so many different publishers. There's the big five, which Macmillan is one of, but there's a lot of smaller independent publishers as well. So, and everyone's producing like really great quality books, but there's a lot more fiction being produced than nonfiction. So if you're a journalist, say you are Caroline Overington and you are the literary editor at the Australian newspaper, right? So national newspaper, got a great reach. We all know that. Everyone wants to get in the Oz. But Caroline would probably get sent, I don't know, maybe I'm going to guess between 50 to 100 books every single week to look at, see if she wants to review it for the newspaper. And our job as publicists is to cut through that very crowded space and make sure that someone like Caroline is reviewing our books. So you, Mark, I've told you before that you're a PR gold for a publicist, because you have a lot, there's a lot to your story, Mark, like you've got a lot we can sort of use as PR angles, as I like to call them. So you are probably in a more fortunate position than other authors that are of your kind of, in your league at the moment, your peers, you would say. However, it certainly doesn't mean that there's any guarantee of immediate media coverage for your book. But if we want to touch on what you was talking about earlier, yes, Mark has had some very early media about his upcoming novel, and that's because of your role now with the WA Liberal Party. So we won't go too much into that now. Everyone can Google if they would like to. But yeah, so that's a different case. So let's not dwell on that, I suppose. We're here to talk about a more traditional kind of book publication release. So the difference when it comes to fiction and nonfiction is it's harder for fiction, especially if you are a debut author like you are, Mark, in the fiction space. But it also it forces the publicist or the marketing team to think outside the square a little bit more and just think about, how can we cut through when the journalists are getting so many other great books from everywhere else, including from our own list. Like we've got a few books publishing on the 30th of July, the day of yours, Mark. So we have to almost compete with each other internally to get the media coverage for the book that we're working on. Mm-hmm. So it can be, it's a lot of fun, of course.
It's something for... Yeah, and when I think back to kind of the genesis of this, one of the things you do when you're an author, and there's people listening to this that'll want to know some things about this process. So this is a traditionally published path, but when I originally pitched the nonfiction memoir, I did a full book proposal, which is basically a business case for your book, and that's a really good way of testing the idea, seeing what else is out there in the market, and see if there's a prospect for it. You got to have that creative side, but it's also a business plan. If you're going through a traditional publisher, you need to know you can sell enough copies that it will be a viable kind of option. With the fiction piece, I had to go to Alex with this idea, and we kind of threw it around a bit. I'm like, look, I've got this idea about something that hasn't really been done that much in the market yet. So I think it might be a different angle that you could potentially sell. Because when you go to the book, as part of my research, I was going to a lot of places that were selling books and just looking to see if there was this type of genre in there, and I couldn't really find it. Last time someone really did something like this was kind of Tomorrow When the War Began, which again was young adult fiction, and that ended up doing quite well. So this is a different take on an old genre, which is kind of, I guess, dystopian fiction. And I think it's good. I think we'll be in good shape.
I agree, Mark. And just to sort of narrow in on that a little bit, again, Alex, as your publisher and your editor, he's one of, I think 8 publishers we have here at Pan Macmillan. So like the media, our publishers get a lot of pitches, you could say, for books as well. These are from authors who we may have worked with before, like yourself. It could also be authors we've never heard of before, or it could be an author that's established and wants to change publishers. It could be regular Joe who has a fantastic book idea and they think it's worth publishing. So the way that you can sort of like the way basically, Mark, that you did this, you went about it in such a fantastic way because you showed that you understood the process, you know, and working with Alex so closely on your memoir has obviously, you know, that, you know, you're familiar to us. Alex knows you and he knows you can write, and that's the most important thing. But yeah, often the case is that our publishers have so much to look at that they need to, you know, rely on the assistants and then the editors. So often the whole publishing side of the business, there's quite a few eyeballs on a manuscript or a proposal for a manuscript before it even gets to the table where they decide if they are going to proceed with an offer. So it can be it's pretty cutthroat, I'm not going to lie, to be able to say that your book is being published by a established publication house. It's a massive coup, and it's not something that everyone can do. And as much as the author's commercial appeal, I guess is what you want to say, like from a publicity perspective, as much as that plays a role, if the book isn't very good, no publisher's going to publish it. So it's sort of it's a mix of everything, you know. When the publishers are looking at who we should publish, the writing, the skill of the writing is of course number one, but number two, it also is really relevant to the author. Who is this person? It doesn't mean they have to be famous or they have to have a big social media following, but we need to maybe almost assess them and see, are they marketable really? And that doesn't mean you have to have won Survivor like you, Mark, or, you know, it doesn't mean you have to be a Jane Harper who's got 2 movies made out of her novels, but there's definitely something in the personality and the vibe, I guess, for lack of a better word, of the author and who that is. So it's it sounds very mysterious, but it's really just a matter of, does this have legs? We believe it does have legs. And then from then, once the deal is done, as you know, Mark, then it's just on for young and old. It's all of our job to make sure the book sells. And that's just the collective goal, I guess, from everyone once we've signed the contract with the author.
Yeah, and once upon a time, I guess an author's platform, which is kind of, I guess, their reach to an audience, once upon a time that wouldn't have been such a factor. Now in the age of social media and email marketing and all those things, that is a factor as well. From what I understand, the publisher does look at that as part of the overall package that an author is presenting. So anyone who's listening, if you think about doing a book, doesn't matter if it's fiction or non-fiction, start kind of thinking about that platform now. Start with an email list and just build that over time. Just generate, offer value. You don't have to sell anything. Just tell everyone what you're doing. And something I've done differently this time that I didn't do last time, I just did social media updates periodically. I just talked about what I was going through and what I was finding hard, what was easy. It just gives people an idea that what you're coming with this book, and this is what you're offering is some, I guess, advice in the background. So I think that helped well. And I mean, from your perspective too, Candice, what have you seen in the past that's really helped with book marketing that people can start working on early?
I really think a really important element that every burgeoning author or anyone who thinks they've got a writing task inside them is to have an understanding of who else is being published and why. Like, you need to use a little bit of emotional intelligence, but you need to see having an understanding of the industry as a whole is really important, because it also sets you up to it almost manages your expectations from the get-go. But if you the best way, I guess, to do that is to be conscious of what else is happening. So make sure if you want to establish yourself as an author and find a publisher, it's really going to work in your favor if you subscribe, for example, to the newsletter called The Book List, which goes out every Friday. It's written by Jason Steger, who's the literary editor at The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald. That is like a public thing. It's not an industry thing. It's a consumer media outlet. So that in itself, it sounds so simple and very easy, but you'd be surprised about how many authors aren't aware of it or don't know about it. So making sure you know what's happening in the industry is really important. And another really easy and good way to do this is, like you mentioned earlier, Mark, go into bookstores. Go to your local bookstore, whether it's an independent or whether it's Big W. Some areas only have a Big W to buy books from. Big W is the biggest selling book, the biggest seller of books in Australia, just FYI. So going into a bookstore and seeing what have they got in the window, what have they got at the front of the store, what have they got next to the register, like all of those point of sale places that we talk about where consumers and customers are most likely to see. That is that's so important, because if you go into your bookstore once a month and you see the displays changing and you realize, as an example, they always got Matthew Riley's books right at the front of the store, but he hasn't had a new book for 12 months. And then what does that tell you? They keep selling. So that's why he's at the front of the store. That's not to say it's only for established. I mean, all good bookstores who have a window or have a lovely display area, they will promote the new releases. So, Mark, when your novel's out at the end of June, we will see it at the front of the stores in various places, which is fantastic. But you kind of only get 1 week to do that, because books come out every week or at least a couple of times a month. So while you are sort of fresh in store, it's a good way to capture a photo of it, definitely. But yes, going back to like what an author can do to establish themselves is not just be aware of what's going on in the industry, seeing what's being published, like looking in every newspaper, I believe, and on a Sunday, they actually have a page where it says the 10 highest sellers of the week across fiction, nonfiction. Sometimes they'll do a lifestyle or whatever. It's all different. So literally just look at that and you'll see some books never leave the top 10. Some books go in there once and then they're never to be seen again. So that's a really good thing to see as well, because that tells you what consumers are buying right now. But also it can be quite tricky, because just because consumers are buying, I don't know, let's say sci-fi alien love stories, right, this month, by the time you've written your alien love story, that could be well out of favor and no one's going to want to publish it.
Yes.
So it's risky, but still great. You've got to know what else is happening out there, because not having that awareness can sort of set you up for failure, because it means you're a little bit narrow-minded and you kind of just think your book is it no matter what, and you have to be a little bit adaptable sometimes if you really want to get published, especially based on, if you get to the pitch stage and your potential publisher gives you feedback, it's always a good idea to take it on board and digest it before you go, forget that, I'm not going to change my book, I know it's perfect, I'm going to try someone else. That's probably a good piece of advice there.
Yep. Yeah. And I think it's a real risk chasing popular genres. And I think I've seen this with Aussie bush fiction. We had some knockout kind of books that came up. Jane Harper drove a few of those. And now if you go into a bookstore, that's all you can see is these shelves and shelves of it. So don't worry too much about chasing genres. Just choose something that you're excited by and maybe you've got some extra knowledge in, and that can help. For everyone who's joined, it's myself and Candice Wyman. Candice is a senior publicist at Pan Macmillan. We're just talking through the development and marketing of traditionally published fiction. So if you're on board and you want to know anything, just list something in the comments if you want, and I'll speak to it directly. We've got a few comments already. So Amy Stanton has said, so excited. When's the book getting launched? I know Amy, I was on Survivor with her, and she's a good mate. She's known as the Lady Tradie. But mate, we'll do the cover reveal this time next week, so 18th of April, and I'll put that all out across social media. That'll be the cover reveal. Pre-orders will also open at the same time, and then the actual book publication date's the 25th of June. I think that's right, isn't it? It's not.
That's right.
Yep. June. Yeah, so it'll be out. That's the one. So it'll be out that week. So I'll be pushing as many pre-orders as I can get, and then on that week, it'll be in every good kind of bookstore. You'll be able to see it all.
We should.
What else we got? Rise of Smart. Oh, you go.
Oh, I was going to say, Matt, we should maybe explain like what this pre-order thing is all about, shouldn't we?
Yeah, for
maybe
sure.
for everyone to understand. So, yeah. So as you said, Mark, we've been talking about your cover reveal date so much lately, but yeah. So next Thursday is the
Yeah,
day
they've even shifted it a bit.
for various reasons. That's right. But yeah, so what us publishers call the cover reveal day, that's the day that the author tells everyone they've got a book coming out. I mean, people know you've got a book coming out, Mark, but next week is when you can show everyone the cover and we can talk more about the actual plot and, more information. So that's great. The reason we do it a couple of months before the actual publication of the book is because we want to drive pre-orders. And pre-orders are obviously, most people would know, is when you buy something that's not going to be delivered to you until it's released. So in this case, your book is out 25th of June. So basically, once you've announced next week, Mike, anyone can go onto pretty much any retailer site, including Big W or Dimmicks or wherever you prefer to buy your books. And you can just pre-order and then it'll arrive in your mailbox should be on publication day, maybe the day before if you're lucky, depending on when the retailer sends them. So that's an exciting touchstone in the journey, basically, because it sort of feels, I don't know if you would agree, Mark, but to me it feels like real once it's out in public. I mean, of course we know it's real, but once you've put it up on your social and then we've shared it as well, obviously on Macmillan's socials and things, then it's sort of like, oh, like, I don't know, it feels like it's more real when that happens. So that's a movement. Like that's the next big step, really, isn't it, in our process of promotion? And then the job that you have to do, I have to do, our colleague in marketing, our job is to sort of ensure as many people know about the book coming out and as many people want to read it as soon as it comes out. So they're doing those pre-orders. And the way we do that, one of the key things I do as a publicist is I send out what we call proof copies, or you may have heard of them described as ARCs, ARC, an advanced reader copy. That's the book, but it's just doesn't have the final cover, and it's not 1,000% final. Like you might spot a few typos or whatnot in the proof version because this is like it's the draft, like it's the final draft almost. And then I've already sent these out, but I send them to as many relevant media as I can think of, like the book writers, the reviewers. Couple of people who are just people of influence that we want to have read the book. It could be someone in your kind of world, Mark, you know what I mean? Like, it's sort of like, it's a bit of we try and keep it focused mainly to media people because we want them to have read it by the time June rolls around and they're going to write their review and publish it in the paper. But the proof copies are really important and they can become quite, I mean, they're not meant to be made public. Like they're not for the general public because of that. If there's typos or something, we don't want people reading that. But yeah, it's an exciting time because you start to see people who've received it and they're actually reading it now. And now it's time for them to start giving feedback, which must be, as an author, like that must be the most exciting part when it's someone telling you how great the book is, Mark, but it's not me, it's not Alex, or it's not anyone who works for the Macmillan. Like to start hearing the strangers' feedback, I suppose, is it must be a great time.
Yeah, it was kind of bizarre from the author side because I spent so long kind of wrestling with this. It was probably about 2 years just on my own, and people can't really help when you're in it. And I think for anyone who wants to do this, I was probably doing, my routine was probably 3 hours a day. I'd go from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. kind of 6 days a week. I'd do about 1,000 words a day, and a lot of the writing I was doing was kind of in between that writing. We got to think about the scene a bit more and how it's going to unfold, and that it just takes a lot of bandwidth. Like you might only be writing a couple hours a day, but you're thinking about it all the time. So it's just this, you're having to deal with this thing on your own for so long, and then when it finally is edited enough and goes to the team and goes, all right, this is it, and all of a sudden there's a cover and there's some blurbs and people read it, all of a sudden it becomes very real. But by the time I'd finished with this one, we'd been looking at it so long, I didn't know what I was dealing with, and I didn't know if it was any good anymore. I think Alex was the same. So to get it out to internally into some early influences is good because we're getting that positive feedback.
Yeah.
Question from Rise of Smart Hard audiobook. Who's narrating? So, mate, I narrated the last one because that was non-fiction. That was my story, and I got to tell you, it was hard going. This one's going to be done by, from what I understand, there's some kind of professional voice actors doing it, because if I did it, I'd totally mangle it. So, yeah, there will be an audiobook coming out at the same time, and it'll be available on ebook as well.
Yeah. It's really interesting, the audiobook.
So,
I wasn't even aware myself that there was voice actors until recently. So yeah, that's a really interesting process. It's like, yeah, like they actually cast the actor to read the book. So yeah, that's kind of cool.
yeah.
That's a really cool movement.
Yeah, there's a US author I've been watching, Jack Carr, which I think is a pen name, but he's a former Navy SEAL. He's come out the gates. I think he's done about 6 books now. It's been going for about 7 or 8 years, but he's had some great success in the US, and his books are all done by his audio books are all done by top voice actors, and 1 or 2 have been picked up by Amazon. So, I mean, the world needs your story. So if you think about doing it, my advice is to get started, and it takes a fair bit of time, but it's totally worth it. And the enjoyable part is when you've got a packaged book and you're about to get it out into the market. Has anyone else got any questions? If you do, pop them up in the comments section. I'll talk to Candice for another few minutes, and we'll check off soon. So that's about it. I mean, next week when we do this, I'll talk a bit more about the cover, how that came about. I'll get some of Alex's insights on how they build it, because we started with something totally different in terms of a cover. And as the book evolved in the edits, so too did the cover evolve. And I think what we've been left with is actually really cool. So I'm pretty excited to show it off next week.
Yeah, cover is...
Anything else, Candice?
I was just going to say, the cover, this is not something that I'm normally involved in, obviously, because I'm a publicist and I tend to get the book when it's ready to go, But yeah, the cover is always, not always, but I know, from listening to conversations for the last few years, that the cover can be one of the trickiest things for an author and a publisher to align on. At the end of the day, I think there has, this is not a trade secret or anything. It's happened to every book that's ever been published. But sometimes the end cover is not exactly what the author wants. But I think usually in that case, Mark, from what I understand, again, remember, I'm a publicist, not a publisher. But usually whoever wins the fight, if you really disagree, can't agree about the cover, it will always be the publisher, because the publisher knows what the retailers want. And the cover, as we know, true, can make or break. Yeah, like it's so, I mean, it's like the cover of a magazine, it's
important.
Super important.
And you need the industry knowledge to help drive the cover, because there's so many different factors to it. It's got to stand out on a bookshelf. It's going to be a thumbnail on a phone. It's got to stand out in that sense. There's got to be a promise it's going to convey. And you might not know exactly, as an author, you might not know exactly how that structure works from the publishing side. But I know now, because I'll look at a cover, I'll be like, that's a Lee Child book. And I'll know straight away, because it'll be certain type of, like it'll be a lone character. There might be a weapon. And so it tells you the genre straight away. And then that's important. And I think on 2 occasions now, last book and then this one, I got the name wrong. The publisher came with a much better name, and I got the cover wrong both times. So it just shows sometimes you're better off not marking your own work as an author. It's hilarious.
That's right, Mike. And I'm glad that you can admit that, because sometimes...
Exactly. Yeah, I thought it was a good marketer, but no, I got trounced on that one. Question here from Alex Kane: at what point in a book's evolution should a writer reach out to a publisher? I mean, do you want to speak to that at all, Candice?
Yeah, look, you don't have to have written the whole book by any means. What a lot of publishers appreciate more than actually even if it's like, I don't know, it depends how much you've written, but a treatment is what publishers love to see. A treatment is basically a plan on a page of your book, and what's on that page is obviously a summary of the plot, a synopsis. What is the story? What are you writing? What happens? Who's the goodies? Who's the baddies? What are the touch points of the story? Obviously, that makes sense. But another really important thing that publishers appreciate, because remember, they are pretty time poor, they're going through a lot of submissions. They like to know who like titles, as we call them, like books that are similar-ish to yours. So if you want to write a crime fiction, and you think it's a rural crime fiction like Jane Harper or Chris Hammer or Hayley Scribner, or there's a lot of authors working in that space because it's a very popular genre, then put Chris Hammer, Jane Harper. It doesn't mean that you think your book is as good as theirs, but it means that readers who've read those authors will like your book as well. So that's a really important thing. So a treatment, which is basically your take on the potential of your book, is so helpful, because that can often show the potential publisher, that you kind of understand. Going back to what I was saying earlier about like just having an understanding of what else is happening in the industry is really important. Having that awareness of like who's selling, who's a good author, who could I try and emulate, or who do I want to be like, And I guess, I'm curious, Mark, did you have that in mind when you were thinking about a fiction novel, or your process is probably a little bit different because obviously you've already written a book, but was there fiction authors that you were like, yeah, I feel like I could write a book that readers of so-and-so would like? I mean, we've got a few ideas, but I'm just curious about what you were thinking, I guess, in the initial process.
Yeah, on both occasions, I had comparative titles where you talk about how your book's similar to it and how you're also differentiated from it as well. And then what I didn't realize is the publisher will actually take the figures on that book and look at the sales numbers on it and use it as a comparative title. So in my first one, I think I used one of David Goggins' books, like a self-help motivational one. And the publishers will look at that and go, well, this guy sold 200,000 copies of this book. So if it's even a little bit like it, then there's a market for it. So that's kind of what they're thinking. And in this instance, I had a few comparative titles. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I'll talk about them next week. And I was basically saying, The Road by Cormac McCarthy is one example. Lee Child book, which is probably more commercial fiction, is another example. So, and then Matthew Riley, and then Tomorrow When the War Began. So it gives you an idea of how they're going to position you, where you think the book's going to sit in the marketplace.
Yep.
Very good. So that's something else to add, which I can't remember. No, it's all right. So we'll do this. So we're going to do the same thing again next week. We have the cover reveal there. This will be good because we'll actually be able to talk in specifics about the plot. We'll be able to talk about the cover, how that evolved. We'll be able to cover the whole thing, and pre-orders will open at the same time. So I'll send a note out about that. If you see it, click on the link and register, and you'll be able to jump on it at the exact same time, ask questions about it, and whatever else you like. So that'll be good fun. And if you jump on, I'll also have a special little treat, which only you'll be able to access as a joining party. And it's going to be basically a really well-developed piece of content that will be private, that I'll be able to send out to each and every one of you, which will be a deeper dive on the book. So stand by for that, and join me next week, same place, same time, and we'll have a big discussion there about the book and how the pre-orders are open, and I look forward to seeing you all there. Thanks for joining us, Candice. That was very good. I hope we can.
No problem. It was lovely. Yeah.
Do another good one next week.
Yeah. All right. Great.
Awesome. Thanks so much, everyone. Send me any questions you've got, and this recording will be available online, and I will see you same time next week. Catch up.